everyone. Thanks for joining us. Getting rolling here. Sorry, we're a couple minutes late. It's my fault. Had some tech issues here. We are so excited to have Chris Stanley with us today to chat about all things compliant reviews and just understanding how advisors can leverage reviews to the most within their marketing strategy without breaking any rules, right? And Chris, I know you serve many of our clients. It's always a delight to talk to you. So thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. I appreciate the invite and look forward to chatting with everybody this morning and this afternoon.
Absolutely. So everyone, just so you know, if you've got questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring it. We did have a couple of people submit questions ahead of time. So we'll kind of get to those first here. And again, always casual, got our cups of coffee here. So we'll just get rolling right away. So Chris, again, thank you for being here. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your firm?
Sure. So I'm the founding principal of Beach Street Legal. We're a law firm and a compliance consultancy specifically focused on investment advisors. So investment advisors is our sole focus. And I would say our core practice areas are general day-to-day compliance, corporate legal matters, and then also M&A. So we do a fair amount of transactional work as well. And as you can imagine, and as I'm sure you've seen on your end, the marketing rule has taken up a not insignificant amount of time and research and effort to make sure that we're staying on top of it. The compliance date, the mandatory compliance date was November 4th. So I'm sure folks are very much interested in how they can avail themselves potentially of some of the new permissibility in the rule.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of times when clients reach out to us, they're always worried about what can I say or not say. Google reviews is like the hot topic, right, of the season. Yep. Everyone in our 2023 strategy sessions wanted to understand how to leverage them compliantly, how to not cherry pick reviews while still like putting their best foot forward. And we have a couple of really good questions on that today. So I guess we'll just start with, is there anything in general when you're talking to advisors that you feel like they should know, or maybe that they're not asking when it comes to marketing themselves in a compliant way or collecting reviews?
Yeah, and one of perhaps the most important threshold question, frankly, is does this rule even apply to me? Am I even permitted to consider utilizing testimonials? Because this is a rule under the Investment Advisors Act of 1940 out of the SEC. And so it is specifically applicable to SEC registered advisors. However, to the extent there's any state registered advisors in the audience, not all is lost. Some states do defer their marketing rule, their advertising rule, et cetera, to the SEC. So when the SEC switched over, that state automatically switched over as well. However, there are some states that still categorically prohibit testimonials and still don't believe that clients could conceivably say nice things about an advisor, and therefore you're sort of shut off from that permissibility. So I think that's just the one level setting comment I'll make, is just make sure that you can potentially avail yourself of this rule. And then once you've gotten comfortable with that, then we can sort of dive into, okay, how can we actually avail ourselves of Google reviews, asking for testimonials? How do we go about them in a compliant way? What are the disclosures, et cetera?
That's such a good point. And honestly, something that I knew about, that like not every state was okay with it, right? But when you're so used to working on a virtual platform, everyone kind of assumes like it's a one size fits all approach. So I really love that, just sort of like a disclaimer. Make sure you can do it all at first before diving in.
Yeah. And frankly, one of the most frustrating parts is for advisors that are registered in multiple states. They may be registered in one state that permits testimonials because they defer to the SEC rule. But if they're registered in other states that don't allow it, you're sort of forced in a position where you have to comply with the lowest common denominator. Because as we all know, when you're by and large doing marketing using testimonials, it's online, accessible to anybody in the public, regardless of what state they reside in. So it does create a somewhat frustrating experience for those multi-state registered advisors.
I can imagine. Yeah, that would be incredibly frustrating.
Yes.
But good note to kind of kick us off with here. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and dive into some of the questions we got submitted ahead of time. And this is really just to kind of get your initial feedback. Obviously, just as a disclaimer for everybody, if you want individualized or personalized advice, you need to reach out to Chris directly and, work one-on-one. This is more of just like general information to kind of take and digest when thinking about marketing and testimonials and reviews. So just to kind of kick us off, I've got my list over here on this other screen. One of the first questions, and I get this all the time from my clients as well, is if the point of reviews is to highlight that we're a fantastic business, but we're not really allowed to like cherry pick what reviews we use, how can we even highlight good experiences that clients are having? Is it just sort of kind of like you just hope, right, that everyone's going to say something
Yeah.
nice? What's the compliant way to even ask for testimonials? How do you usually kind of advise on?
Sure. So the good news is that the SEC's adopting release, in other words, the additional commentary they published when they published the final rule, specifically states you don't have to include an equal number of negative reviews to offset an equal number of positive reviews. So it's not like on your website you have to have the nice things and the not so nice things side by side and promoted in equal prominence. The SEC sort of understood, if you will, that, look, the whole point of this is to highlight the nice things and not necessarily the not so nice things. But what the SEC did say is one way that advisors could comply with the anti-cherry picking, fair and balanced components of the rule is to have a disclosure associated with positive comments that more or less says something to the effect of these reviews may not be entirely representative of all reviews that we've received. And it can facilitate a way to provide a client or a prospective client access to view the entirety of the testimonials, the comments that may have been made in a public forum. So in other words, you don't have to highlight them with equal prominence, but you still have to disclose there may be other reviews out there that are not quite as rosy as this one that we put on our website.
Okay, I love that. And that's actually something that's interesting because a lot of our advisors have, reviews kind of in like a scrolling bar on their website now that it's permissible.
Sure.
But there's still like some nervousness around, well, what if it's not displaying every new review? Or what if I get 100 reviews? Is it going to slowly scroll through all 100? And I like that. Like you can highlight the ones that maybe are your favorites or from your A-list clients. And then have like a link to your Google review page or something like that at the bottom. That's really good feedback.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of it comes down to disclosure and making sure that things are fair and balanced, even if it is via hyperlink or through some other mechanism.
Sure. And honestly, in today's online world, I think that's so critical to just remember for like web design purposes. Obviously, in PDFs and stuff, if you have just a couple reviews highlighted, you can always use just a verbal disclosure, in text at the bottom. But on your website, there's so much room to play there with how you can link to other platforms. So that's fantastic. That kind of leads us to our next question that I feel like I get all the time is, how do you recover from a bad review? I feel like there's a lot of nervousness and fear out of spam people who maybe are posting, and we've had this happen to a client as well, right? Where clearly a spam person, not a real account, posted like a 1-star review without any feedback. It wasn't tied to anything. How do you recommend advisors kind of bounce back from that? Can they report spam? Is that non-compliant?
So the threshold question here is, has the advisor adopted or entangled him or herself in the particular review? And maybe just to back up a step, if a client posts something directly on Google Reviews, Yelp, some other third-party website, and the advisor doesn't interact with that at all, they don't like it, they don't share it, they don't repost it, they don't excerpt it on their website, the advisor hasn't adopted and entangled themselves with that particular post, and therefore it's not an advertisement under the marketing rule. So that just can sort of lay in the ether, if you will. But if an advisor does see on a third-party site that they want to respond, they want to engage, they want to repost, they want to share on their website, that's when they convert that third-party material to be an advertisement, generally speaking, under the marketing rule, and therefore subject to the disclosure requirements, the fair and balanced requirements, et cetera. So it's a long introduction to get to the point that, yes, you can certainly interact with and respond to negative reviews. Just bear in mind that if that is on a third-party site and you had previously taken the position, oh, this is not our marketing material, as soon as you respond, it kind of becomes your marketing material. And so you are certainly free to do that. One thing I will also mention is that the SEC specifically did say in the adopting release that if there is a comment that is malicious, inappropriate language, just generally harassment, things along those lines, or frankly says something that's factually inaccurate, you can correct that.
Okay.
So if there is a review that says, oh, this advisor will gouge you, they charge a 5% assets under management fee. I mean, if that's just patently wrong, you can certainly correct that and respond accordingly. And again, you don't have to subject yourself to inappropriate abuse online. I think the SEC is recognizing that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's important as well. Just as we are in the sort of new age of technology, right? Like so many review sites, like there are spam people, but then like you had said, there's also like competitors who leave like faulty reviews. And so being able to address
Yep.
those and not like, you don't have to open yourself up to harassment or, whatever else just because you're online these days, right? Like I just think that's a good rule. It's nice to see that the SEC is kind of catching up a little bit there too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic and very helpful. And I can say too, we've had clients who did have like a spam review left that wasn't tied to an actual client account, left like in non-factual information, and getting it removed is relatively straightforward, like through Google and stuff.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, the burden effectively will be on the advisor to maintain records to prove why they maybe edited or requested a review to be removed or otherwise took some sort of action to have it taken down. Because the SEC will probably assume that you're just trying to, again, point or create a purely rosy picture. But if you can demonstrate, no, our fee schedule is this, or no, this person was never actually a client, or this is just completely inappropriate language to be posted in a public forum, then yeah, that's all fine.
No, that's perfect. And as always, archive, leave a paper trail, right? As with anything marketing, just make sure that you're compiling kind of your folder, so to speak, right? Just to make sure that you've got it to fall back on. Great. Well, then next kind of question was much more broad, but how do you compliantly ask for reviews if that's something you're interested in from clients? Do you have to ask everyone all at once? That's usually what we recommend, just to err on the safe side. But what do you guys recommend?
Yeah, that's a common question that we received. And frankly, one I was hoping that the SEC would address. I think potentially they may still in subsequent FAQs, guidance, et cetera. As a quick detour, the SEC did specifically state, I don't know if it was in a risk alert or a guidance or just a public announcement, that they were going to specifically examine firms for compliance with the new marketing rule, and likely will focus on testimonials and endorsements. But typically, what the SEC will do after conducting a sweep or doing some further research is they'll publish a risk alert on their site that more or less says, we've examined a bunch of firms on this particular topic. Here's how people are screwing it up, and here's how you should actually do it the right way. And then they can also issue FAQs, much like they've done for the custody rule, et cetera, et cetera. But point being, the question of whether you have to ask the entirety of your client audience for reviews is not specifically stated. There's a general prohibition in the marketing rule that says you have to be fair and balanced. You can't create a misleading inference, et cetera, et cetera. So that has led us to the conclusion that it would be best practice to ask all of your clients to leave a review if you're going to ask at all. Some follow-ups or poking and prodding that I've received from advisors is like, okay, can I send an email blast out to everybody, but then maybe have a follow-up phone call with a couple of my top clients that are most engaged or something along those lines? I've gotten comfortable with that approach. I think if you are hounding clients or rewarding them in some way to leave a positive review, I think you're sort of getting closer to that edge of creating a not fair and balanced environment. But if you're doing it equally across all clients, you're actually keeping a record of any reviews or feedback that you received and not just deleting or discard the ones that you don't like, then generally speaking, that should be permissible.
No, I love that. And I think too, something that we recommend is like, in order to keep it fair and balanced, right, bake it into your process after the initial ask. So maybe you ask everybody all at once, but then maybe it's after review meetings or after a positive client interaction or meeting, like being able to have that as part of just your standardized follow-up. And that way, what's going to go out to whoever you meet with, but in general, you'll be meeting with your more engaged clients more often, right? So like you'll probably get more of that positive feedback.
No, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good, like, again, just playing it safe. We never want advisors to toe the line. We want to be as far away from the line as humanly possible when it comes to compliance issues. So I think that's fantastic. Well, then a couple other questions that I had just kind of heard. Best way to highlight Google reviews or Facebook reviews, or does it matter where you're getting reviews? Do you recommend collecting them in a form so that you have kind of like a backlog? Is using a third-party site like Facebook or Google or Yelp best? What do you recommend there for collecting reviews?
Sure. So, and frankly, this will probably be, more in your wheelhouse of expertise, and I'll sort of have my compliance hat on, but also my marketing hat on. The way that we've seen most advisors approach this is to avail themselves of the third-party content that already exists. So to the extent that there have been reviews left on a Google reviews site or on a Facebook page, et cetera, you might as well start interacting with those and promoting those venues as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel in-house with your own native platforms that maybe not everybody is going to every day, but they are going to a Facebook or a LinkedIn or a Google reviews site more often. And so kind of avail yourself of what's already out there. I mean, as far as the best particular platforms, I'm far from a social media expert. So I would say whatever is on brand for your firm, wherever you found the most traction, wherever you publish the most content, wherever you're most known, take advantage, double down, go into that particular space. And I would say that should probably lead you to the most fruitful endeavors from a testimonial perspective.
I think that's fantastic. We usually recommend the same to our advisors. We have a handful of people who like Yelp, but in general, Google reviews is just the easiest, right? You can set up a Google My Business profile, create a link that's like, hey, go to this link and you can leave a review. Just make it very easy on your client. So it's a lighter lift and a lighter ask, basically. But I think
and I would say,
go ahead.
Yeah. So, sorry. I was just going to say too, to the extent that you are planning to ramp up the interactions that you have on social media platforms, it might not be worth, it might be worth exploring to the extent that you have an email archiving vendor, whether it's Marsh, whether it's Global Relay or another third-party service, can they also tie into your social media profiles and automatically keep an archive of your social media content as well? That way you're not having to like manually screenshot or download PDFs or things along those lines. Because again, to your earlier point, archiving here is key from a record keeping perspective.
No, I love that. And I think too, most archiving platforms are able to do that. I've not explored whether or not they archive like reviews that are left, but I'm sure they do, especially because it's becoming such a prominent ask of advisors, right?
Right.
Well, those are kind of the questions we had submitted ahead of time. Let's go ahead and open it up to the audience. If anyone has questions, feel free to submit them in the chat section. I'll kind of monitor here. And otherwise, Chris, this has been incredibly valuable. I feel like we get questions about reviews constantly. So just having a little bit of a snapshot of the way to pull it off best, how to highlight them, how to make sure you're, promoting good stories. I guess one question I'm thinking of, just things that clients have talked to us recently about, is what's the best way to phrase your ask? I know that's really specific. We usually have a template that sort of guides people without, prompting them to be positive. But do you have sort of a recommendation of just keep it very standard and, I don't want to say plain, but straightforward, right? Just asking for the review, letting them know you value their feedback? Or is there a way to kind of, I feel like a lot of the hesitancy people have for leaving a review is they're not sure what to say, right? So do you recommend advisors give them some examples of what they could talk about, or does that lean too far into, hey, like you're trying to get a positive response here?
Yeah, I would certainly avoid scripting a response or suggesting how they can respond or prompting them in any way to leave one type of review as opposed to the other. Or I don't even know if this is possible, but sending a link to a rating site where the highest rating is already pre-populated or something along those lines. So point being is you want to facilitate the clients leaving an honest review. You can also phrase it as feedback. You can say, hey, look, we take all of our feedback seriously. We review all of the comments. To the extent you feel comfortable publishing these in an online forum, we would very much welcome the opportunity for you to do so. Here's a link to our Google business page. Here's a link to our Facebook business page, LinkedIn, et cetera. And so you can you can make it easy for them in terms of providing the direct hyperlinks, but definitely don't prescript it or slant the deck and say, hey, we'd love a positive review on this site. It helps our SEO or whatever the case may be.
No, that makes sense. And I think the advisor that I was thinking about had kind of not pre-populated responses, but said like, we'd love it if you told like a story about working with us. And I understood what they were getting at, right? Where they wanted to really highlight and kind of help their audience feel like, okay, like now I know exactly what I want to write about. And I'm not just going to like leave a 5-star review and leave. But it still feels like it was just, a little too close to the line for my comfort.
And I mean, to be honest with you, telling a story, if you said, hey, we'd love it if you told a story about working with us, I frankly think that might be fine because perhaps the story's bad. Yeah. They could say like, wow, it was impossible to find their office.
That's certainly not the goal.
They were late. Yeah. They had terrible beverages in their office. Like whatever. I mean, who knows? You could be opening yourself up there. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair way to go about it.
Okay.
If you said, hey, remember that story about how we knocked it out of the park and saved you a bunch of money and,
then maybe that's
crushed
not
the
as great.
returns?
Sure.
Yeah, then that's a bit pushing the line.
That's funny. No, that's perfect. Well, it looks like we covered most of the questions that we had, which I think is fantastic. If anyone has questions for you, Chris, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, website is beachstreetlegal.com. We have a form you can fill out if you want to schedule a time to chat. We're also at team@beachstreetlegal.com, headquartered here in St. Louis, but we have a remote team in Ohio and Michigan as well. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to chat here today. I'm sure yourself included, myself included, and those on the line will be watching to see how advisors start to roll out their use of testimonials. And I'm sure there'll be some interesting use cases to learn from, and look forward to having any conversations that advisors may want to have on that topic.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. Well, thank you again for being here. This has been an honor and a pleasure, and I'll make sure that everyone who attended today gets the recording. It'll go on our YouTube channel. Chris, I'll provide you with the recording as well. But this has been fantastic. I'll include Chris's contact information for anyone who is interested, and otherwise have a great rest of your Friday and a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye. Thanks.